can we begin with what the correct vaccination schedule in an ideal world with no shortages would be? When should people be vaccinating their horses? And I can tell you this as a competitor, is everyone loved to leave horse sickness vaccines until December when we were all taking our December holidays. And they would say, oh, we'll give the horses a lovely 6 weeks off over December and vaccinate them then. I can see Sheilagh's about to actually have an aneurysm. So can we discuss which vaccine first and why? We did have a question earlier on about, is the second vaccine allowed before the first vaccine?
Yes, there's no restriction or legal issues in terms of whether you give vaccine 1 first or whether you give vaccine 2. What has occurred and through research is that in your naive horses, so your foals and your imported horses, if you give vaccine number 1 first and then followed it up with vaccine number 2 afterwards, what they have discovered is strain 2 in vaccine 1 tends to cause much more of a reaction, particularly when 2 is given afterwards.
Okay.
So
how many strains are in each vaccine, just to recap?
Well, in number 1, you've got 3 strains, so you've got 2, 3, and 4. And then in number 2, you've got 2, 6, 7, and 8. 6 cross-reacts with 9 and 8 with 5. So those 2 are not in the vaccine.
Okay.
So with your imported horses, and as I say, the weanlings, we tend to give number 2 first.
Okay.
And then follow it with number 1. But in my practice, I just found that it became quite difficult to remember who had number 2 first and who had number 1. So I just, as a rule, do number 2 first.
Okay.
And then follow it with number 1. They've also done research that has proven it doesn't matter which one you give first. The immune response and they've tested the antibodies sort of like a month after they've been vaccinated is exactly the same. So it doesn't make a difference to the immune response.
And we spoke yesterday a little bit about vaccinating when and why, that there should be a 30-day or 6-week gap ideal between the vaccines to allow for the correct immune response.
Well, it's an attenuated live vaccine. So when you inject the vaccine, you actually have circulating virus for 40 days. And that's one of the reasons that you can't move to the Western Cape, because there is a live circulating virus. The pamphlet and the regulations are that it must not be given in less than 3 weeks.
Okay.
Because if you give it in less than 3 weeks, it actually makes both of those vaccines invalid.
So there can't be an overlap. No. There has to be one vaccine and at least 21 days in the second vaccine.
Yes. And you can't get the 2 together because you're running out of time.
Okay.
It's better, I think, to leave longer. The other point I want to also address is that with your naive horses and your imported horses, is that you need to try and get more than one vaccine in the season.
Okay. And the season should be from?
Usually from June.
Okay.
In the Western Cape, it closes on the 31st of October. It's recommended to try and do it before then. From the point of view of the SAEF and sporting horses, it's till the end of the year.
Okay.
What you really don't want is people vaccinating horses at the height of the mid-season, which is usually February through until May or June.
Okay. And that's because, do you mind touching base on that basically the midges could then bite a vaccinated horse and
spread it?
Okay.
Yes.
So it's a little bit worse than that, right? So the midges can then transmit a vaccine virus into a horse that has infection, and you can get recombination and recrudescence of the vaccine virus to become a live virus that could, in fact, potentially, in its worst form, generate a new strain of virus that we essentially would not be able to vaccinate for until we understand the virus, right? So in the outbreaks that have occurred in the Western Cape have actually been because of vaccinated horses coming into contact with infected horses that then in fact led to a recombination of the virus and an active outbreak.
Okay.
So the package insert speaks about June to October.
Okay.
Actually in the package insert of the vaccine.
Okay.
That is stretched by my veterinary colleagues and their clients to December. But so I personally believe that story completely,
Okay.
and we vaccinate our horses in Johannesburg June to October.
Okay.